Hi, welcome to the Kindle Chronicles. Today is November 8th, 2019. This is the 588th episode of the Kindle Chronicles. This is a weekly show about the Kindle, Amazon, and books, authors, and I've been doing it now for about 11 years. If you're new to the show, I hope you'll enjoy it, and if you're a longtime listener, welcome back. I have an interview that I recorded some time ago with Jane Friedman, and actually, no. I'm thinking of the Dean Koontz interview, which is coming up next week. That one I did do 18 days ago. But I spoke with Jane Friedman for this week's episode while I was back in Denver on Monday. Part of the reason I'm confused about this is that since I talked to you last, Darlene and I have traveled to Omaha, then we drove to Des Moines for an event, and then drove back to Omaha, flew to Denver, spent a couple of days there, and then got back to here in Cambridge 2 days ago. If I don't know whether I'm coming or going, that probably has something to do with it. I love talking with Jane. I hope you're going to enjoy the interview. It's a little bit longer than usual, but I had a chance to review a lot of the history of publishing with her, and she's been a veteran of the book publishing industry for more than 20 years. She was, I think she was editor of Writer's Digest, which was a really well-respected trade publication for writers, one that I consulted back in my early writing days. And she's since then done a lot with helping writers to use all the new digital tools. And in the process, of course, she's had a real keen sense of what Amazon has been doing to change the book world. And I find her very even-keeled. I tried to get her to weigh in on Macmillan versus the libraries or vice versa, and the authors against Audible on their new chapters technology, which has sparked a lawsuit. And in each case, she managed to be diplomatic, but not just ducking questions, just having a nuanced, full view of things that are happening. And this is the kind of person I really enjoy talking about, and so it was really good to visit with her. In news, I want to talk about devices, and I was going to try to summarize some of the deals that are already popping up in advance of Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and there's been some good coverage of it, but it's just overwhelming. There's so many devices and there are so many promotions that Amazon has already started, but I'm going to give you a link in the show notes to an article in CNET, which does a good summary of what's out there now, which prices have been dropped. There are going to be some prices dropped on November 22nd. For example, the Paperwhite is going to, which normally sells for $130, will go down to $85 on November 22nd, and the Fire HD tablet, the 10, which is the new one, is going to drop from $150 to $100, and that's the 10.1-inch 1080p full HD display, 32 gigabyte tablet. So if you think you're going to be buying an Echo or a Kindle or a tablet anytime in the coming weeks, you really owe it to yourself to start with that CNET article, which you'll find at thekindlechronicles.com, or just any of the other Mashable, or if you just Google Amazon device deals, you'll be able to see what's popping up. And certainly by the time we get to Black Friday on November 29th, the day after Thanksgiving, or Cyber Monday, December 2nd, there are going to be deals on all of these devices. Good time to be breaking into the Echo world if you've been delaying, and also a good time to refresh your Kindle equipment if that's necessary. Darlene's Oasis, the previous generation, pretty much died on her. She just wasn't able to recharge it, and I suggested that she might want to go with the Paperwhite because it has the same 6-inch screen that she's used to on the previous Oasis. The current Oasis has the 7-inch screen, which I prefer. So she got a good deal on a Paperwhite, and I think she's happy about it. She misses that original Oasis, which had the funky battery halfway in the case and halfway on the device. But that one finally gave up the ghost. I'll mention some first impressions of that Fire HD tablet, or all new Fire HD tablet as Amazon's calling it. I bought one just for myself to see, and I got the plum color in it. It's quite attractive. It seems thinner to me than the old HD10, which I had, and it's just a beautiful way to watch a TV show. I mean, it's a device for consuming media, and it's good for reading magazines, and that big screen is good in a lot of cases. It's a little bulkier to use. I've frequently used the 10-inch Fire tablet for my show notes. So if I have notes that I'm creating in Evernote that I use to put the show here together, it's pretty handy just to have that 10-inch Fire tablet as what I read from. Lately, I'm using the Remarkable tablet to use notes because I'm having more fun creating them with the Remarkable. But this is a terrific upgraded device, same price, $150. But as I said, on November 22nd, it'll drop down to $100. There's another device that came, and I saw this one previewed at the product preview that I attended in Seattle a while back, and this is the Echo Buds. And I was pretty excited about these because they're buds like AirPods, a lot of really high audio equipment in your ear. But I'll have to say, in my first impressions of the buds, which arrived a couple of days ago, there's some drawbacks to it that I haven't quite got used to. First of all, the case that they come in is quite a bit larger than the case that contains my Apple AirPods. And I put all my road gear in a fanny pack, and this thing is going to take up, I'd say, a third more space in the fanny pack than the nice white charging case for the AirPods. The second thing is that it's a big device. I mean, there's a Bose noise canceling. There's all kinds of technology in this, and to get all of that in there, it's just sort of a fat little thing that when I put it in my ear and I look in the mirror, I think, my gosh, there's it almost looks like an earring or something that's it really stands out, and it's black, so it doesn't sort of hide as much as the white AirPods do. So I don't like the look of it. I didn't like the look of the AirPods when they first came out too, and now they're just sort of standard. The other thing I'm not impressed with so far is the sound quality. It feels kind of tinny in my ear, and it doesn't seem like the quality of the audio is as good as it is on the AirPod. Now, there is an equalizer on it, so on the app, on my Alexa app on my phone, I can adjust it, and I may just need to tweak that to get it to a better range. The real purpose of these AirBuds is to bring Alexa to a new form feature, a new kind of a wearable, and that got quite a bit of emphasis at the briefing in Seattle. I've had some experience with that actually working. I had the AirBuds, the all these names, the Echo Buds in my ear, and I've said, Alexa, such and such, and then she's in my head, she's in my ears, and she'll tell a joke or do whatever I've summoned. I'm finding that the coordination of that with my other Echo devices in the house is problematic. Now, the devices have smartly been arranged so that they all can hear for the wake word, listen for the wake word, but only one of them will respond. But it seemed like the Echo Buds were not having that kind of coordination with the speakers when I was trying it, and that was a little difficult. I also thought I might have a pretty easy syncing of these Echo Buds with my, for example, the Fire HD tablet, but I thought I was going to just watch a bit of a movie on that, and it just was very difficult to get them synced up with the Fire tablet, which is, two Apple devices having trouble, two Amazon devices having trouble finding each other. These kinds of getting devices to sync up with the hardware, I have challenges of that when I have my Echo Auto in the Tesla and I'm trying to start it up. Sometimes it seems to start up right away. Other times I get a little voice coming out of the Echo Auto saying cannot connect with your device, and all these things that depend on Bluetooth to connect with each other. It's not easy, and I think that my tolerance for pain in the neck aspects of using technology is pretty high, but it's being challenged. Now, what I know too is that when I get a new device like this, after a week or two of using it, I may very well get to more of an appreciation for its benefits. And the one thing that they demonstrated, which I don't think actually happens yet, but they're eventually Whole Foods at a specific store will be able to have Alexa answer in your ear, Alexa, which aisle is the sparkling water in? And she'll say, aisle 11. And that will be a nice moment, which will give me another chance to say, boy, these devices, can you believe it? When I'm at Whole Foods, I can just have her tell me which aisle to go to. I don't know why that's useful, but it's something which appeals to me. And if Alexa in these devices can start doing some things which are unusual and new and useful, that's exactly the kind of thing I like to try to find when I'm experimenting with this new technology. So that's the Fire HD 10 tablet that's new, and the Echo Buds. I have not gotten anything that says I'm going to get an Echo Loop. That's the ring that you're going to be able to talk to, and I think that's going to be less weird. The idea of walking down the aisles of Whole Foods talking to myself because Alexa's in my ears, that seems pretty strange. But if this Echo Loop, which is an actual black ring that you can kind of bring it up closely to your mouth and say, Alexa, where's the candy aisle? Or, you might be able to get away with doing that in a way that didn't look like you're just sort of talking to yourself. And again, those are the fun things to experiment with, is what do these new technologies feel like? Do I feel as silly as when I was riding around Denver on one of the first Segways, or Google Glass, or is it something that, like the Apple Watch, which really just sort of fits into life in a way that isn't quite so strange? For the tech tip, I want to talk about an issue which came up from listener Sonia Brock, who sent me an email, and I had a chance to get some background information about the problem from Amazon. Sonia wrote, I like to listen to podcasts, including yours, usually on my iPhone attached to a speaker. Tonight, this is November 7th, I decided to listen to one of my favorites, CBC's Quirks and Quarks, on my Amazon Echo because the sound is better on the Echo. Big mistake. About 10 minutes into the podcast, an announcement came bellowing in, asking me to watch something that might have been called Modern Love. Not a problem. Now, Modern Love is one of the new Amazon shows. I'm used to commercials in podcasts. Then the podcast cycled back to the top again, and I had to listen to what I'd already heard before the commercial. I did that, and about 15 minutes into the podcast, it happened again. A commercial came on, and I was taken back to the top of the podcast. Needless to say, I won't be using the Echo to listen to podcasts again. Not at least until I've been assured that Amazon has got their act together. Don't expect you to do anything, but I thought you might like to know. All the best, Sonia Brock. Well, this was of interest to me, and of course the idea that Amazon was somehow slipping in ads to a podcast that was being delivered by Echo. I haven't had a chance to find out from Sonia. I was assuming it might have been from TuneIn, because that's how my podcasts show up on the Echo. But anyway, I had a chance to check this out with someone that I know at Amazon, and on background, what I found out was that it was most likely an issue with the particular file or stream that was given to Amazon from the provider to play. And in other words, when they play a podcast on Alexa, the providers give them the URL needed to stream the content. Amazon doesn't store any content, and they also don't have any ad manipulation that they do for podcasts that are being delivered through their devices. So I think it's kind of hard to tell exactly what happened happened in this situation, but it isn't in any way a known bug, and it sounds like it might have been an issue with the file. So when I passed that back on to Sonia, she responded, this is a puzzlement. I listened to the whole episode of Quirks and Quarks again today with a different advertiser and had no problems. It makes sense that the podcast provider controls the advertising. I think I assumed too quickly that it was an Echo quote feature. I will take this up with CBC Quirks and Quarks folks. I'm glad it turned out that way, that this is not in any way some kind of a common problem that would have really not been a good development for the ability to listen to podcasts on Echo devices. And if you are listening to podcasts on your Echo devices, I'd be interested in any experiences you might have had. Mine has been pretty good, although sometimes when I say, Alexa, play the Kindle Chronicles podcast, I don't get the most recent feed. Now, I think they're depending on the RSS feed, which is generated for my show by Libsyn, and it gets picked up by TuneIn, so it's got kind of a lot of handoffs before it gets to the device, but that's been the only complaint that I've had on it. Otherwise, it's kind of fun just to, with a simple voice command, hear the Kindle Chronicles coming out of one of my Echo devices. Time now for the interview. As I said, Jane Friedman has more than 20 years of experience in the book business, and she currently produces 2 excellent newsletters for writers based on that experience. They are the Hot Sheet, which is a paid newsletter, and the Electric Speed email newsletter, which is free. She is also a columnist at Publishers Weekly, a professor with the great courses, and a prolific essayist and speaker. I connected with Jane by Skype on Tuesday, November 4th. That's when I was back in Denver. I began by asking her about her recent experiment of adding classified ads to her free newsletter, Electric Speed.
It's certainly not a new idea as far as classifieds and email newsletters, at least not the newsletters I read. So, for instance, Anne Friedman, no relation to me, and there's another newsletter, Dense Discovery, that to me, to like outside observation, feels like they do really brisk business in classified ads. So, and I really enjoy them as well when I read these, because they fit the voice and the style and the personality of the publication. They're clearly made up of advertisers who were already interested in the people running the newsletter. So I thought, why not? I mean, I don't want to say that I'm doing it to make money, but certainly MailChimp's increased fees have made me, maybe think a little bit more about how much I'm spending on sending out these newsletters, although they are definitely like my number one marketing tool aside from the blog. So, and you
have to pay MailChimp because you've got about 33,000 subscribers. I'm still under the 1,000, so I don't have. I forget. Wait a minute. Yeah, some people do have to pay MailChimp.
Yeah, it's getting close to $300 a month at this point.
Wow.
So, but even if I had to pay that, it would be worth it given the direct communication with readers. Yeah,
exactly. Well, I thought that they're pretty reasonably priced because it's $100 to get one of. Is it 3 or 4 ads you're going to have in each issue?
It's 4 slots per issue, and then 2 issues per month.
And you've already sold out December and January, so it looks like you're pricing it too low.
I know, exactly, right? If you sell out that fast, you've priced too low. I agree, and I will probably have to raise the rates. But I want to at least gather some data about how well the ads perform. Because, my open rates aren't fantastic. I think they're pretty industry standard, about 30% on average. So, I want to make sure that people are actually getting something valuable from it before I raise rates.
Well, let's step back and I've gotten Electric Speed, and I think it's one of the easiest newsletters that I get to read. There's something about the crispness of the writing, which naturally I'd hope you're writing it well, and you do. But what does someone who subscribes to Electric Speed get every 2 weeks? What sorts of benefit are you giving writers that way?
I focus on digital media tools and resources, so I'm kind of I really love testing out new apps and gadgets and softwares and services in the cloud, and part of it is, I think that it helps me make better recommendations to writers on how to be more productive, but I also just have an inherent interest. So that each issue looks at 3 or 4 things that I've noticed lately that might be useful. Sometimes a how-to article or resource guide gets mixed in, and then I also have something that's a little bit more fun, just something that I think is delightful and that I hope that even if people don't like the techie stuff, they'll find something that interests them.
Some of the newsletters that I get come every week. How did you settle on biweekly as opposed to weekly?
I didn't feel like I would have enough interesting things to share every single week. Sometimes I even struggle with every 2 weeks. I mean, it's not like there are all sorts of dramatic new launches that are worth talking about. So I think that kind of, even at every 2 weeks, it kind of stretches the boundaries of what I can recommend that I really could, I don't know, feel good about recommending. So if I do pick up the frequency, which I've certainly thought about, I think I would have to include new types of content.
It's funny because until I was reading a little more closely, I didn't realize it was biweekly. It felt like it was weekly because it's regular. And, I think that one concern about going biweekly as opposed to weekly is, are people going to forget about me? But as long as you're regular, I think that's a perfectly valid interval.
Yes, I've been sticking with that schedule going back to roughly, I want to say 2015 or 2016.
Yeah.
So, at this point, I've trained people.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you have another newsletter, Hot Sheet, that you founded with Porter Anderson in 2015, and that's a paid newsletter of $59 a year. What do subscribers get in that newsletter that they wouldn't get if they're just doing the free newsletter, Electric Speed?
So the free Electric Speed is really for any kind of writer, even people who are just working in the creative industries like designers, photographers, illustrators. And it's not necessarily, Electric Speed isn't necessarily specific to the writing practice. But the Hot Sheet is definitely in the weeds of the publishing business, specifically book publishing, although it stretches into other forms of media. And it's for what I consider the professional authors, so authors who are making money at their writing or want to make a living. So it's really looking at what are the changes in traditional publishing and self-publishing, what are the new services out there, how are earnings going all across the map, what are the trends. So especially when I go out to places like Digital Book World or Book Expo, I'm attending as many sessions as I can and making sure that I'm kind of have my finger on the pulse and what authors might need to know.
Can you say how many subscribers you have to that newsletter?
Yeah, it's about 1,200 currently.
Yeah. Well, you have been covering the book industry for more than 20 years and helping writers navigate the business. I had this idea of a writer who was totally on top of the book industry 20 years ago and then went to sleep for 2 decades, a Rip Van Winkle writer, and coming to you at a Digital Book World or somewhere and say, hey, what do I need to know about being a writer now versus 20 years ago? What would be the top of the line items that you'd have to educate this person on?
So 1999, wow. I mean, that's still when, Barnes and Noble is still kind of riding high.
Yeah.
And where bookstores, I think, are still what I would consider the bookstore market still fairly robust. Very, very early days for Amazon. There is really no, what I think would be a viable ebook market. I mean, there are ebook readers, but we don't have the Kindle. We don't have any frictionless purchasing of digital materials. There are some diehard people out there who still try with
on their Palm Pilot.
Yeah, on their Palm Pilot, exactly. Or, I don't know, when did the Rocket Reader
Yeah, the
come out?
Rocket Book was in that period. Yeah, there might have been a Rocket Book by then, which I thought was going to change the world and made a real fool out of myself promoting.
Well, I think it was 2000, 2001 when Stephen King did his ebook experiment or something. I don't even think that had happened in 1999. So, if you look at, I mean, it's so much like night and day. Obviously, Amazon is probably the number one change. Like, there's no way around it. And the Kindle has wrought so many changes for an author as far as opening up the self-publishing market and providing the tools and services that make that like a viable investment. The also print on demand, which didn't really come into its own until the early 2000s. So, I mean, there's so many things you would have to catch up on. That's just the tip of the iceberg.
The other thought experiment I was toying with this morning was if whoever proposed the Kindle to Jeff Bezos, he said, "No, I don't think so. I think I'm going to go in a cloud service," or, that they just hadn't invented the Kindle. How much of the change that we've had in the last decade or more would have happened anyway, even if Amazon hadn't sort of been the first mover into ebooks in a whole new way?
Well, if I look at who was kind of next, I mean, you've got Apple with the iPad, which did bring a lot of different interesting aspects to the ebook market. It brought us the Department of Justice battle against the big five publishers and Apple because it introduced the price fixing concern. But that, the iPad didn't come out till 2010. Prior to that, I think the Nook was out on the market by that point. And I don't know when Kobo entered, but I think there would be something, but whether it would have the retail power of Amazon is questionable.
You follow the industry from the point of view of a writer, helping writers navigate this, and I tend to be talking about the same space from a reader's point of view. When you think of the effect of digital publishing and everything that has happened, good or bad for book lovers? What are the pros and cons of where we are now versus where we were before this all happened?
Well, the definite pro for writers is that there's more opportunity, which of course comes with responsibility, to get your work on the market and to be an advocate for your work and to directly communicate with readers. So that's in terms of both the retail and distribution environment, where there's this pretty even playing field now with Amazon, given that a self-published book looks the same as a traditionally published book. Like, for all intents and purposes, obviously there are some marketing buttons and levers that maybe authors don't have access to that Amazon does. But still, it's hard for a reader to really know that there's any difference between those two types of books on the platform. So there's that ease into the marketplace, very low or no cost. And then the other piece is the social media marketing and the ability to use all sorts of new avenues to reach readers directly, like through email discount programs such as BookBub, and through video, through audio. It's, we could spend all day talking about the different opportunities there. So that's the pro, like just the power of an author to make their way and build a business model that is not dependent on having an agent, not dependent on someone saying, yes, I want this and think it's valuable. You can find your own audience, especially you can go after more niche or specialized audiences like Amish fiction. So that's, I probably can't overstate just how powerful that is. And
that translates to, thinking from the reader's point of view, the pro for the reader there is a tremendous amount of new books that just wouldn't have even been possible to read before that.
Right, precisely. The bad news for traditional publishers, of course, is that all of this change has decimated the old mass market paperback sort of model. The romance community traditional romance publishing has been forever changed. It's very hard for traditional publishers now to play in those lower price ranges. I mean, they have to now really look at big brands and blockbuster authors where they can charge their $15 for an ebook or $20+ for the print. So it's changed what traditional publishers will take on, and obviously there's been a lot of mergers and consolidation because they need kind of this heft in the marketplace in order to better compete and set terms with places like Amazon.
Yeah, exactly. It's been an interesting legal fight over the Audible's captions feature, where, as I understand it, I think they're doing it in some schools on public domain books while it's being battled by the publishers. But as I understand it, if I'm listening to an Audible book on my iPhone or something else, I can see about 20 words on my screen as they're being read by the author. And the publishers are saying that's copyright infringement. Amazon is saying it's fair use. I see that one of the services you provide to newsletter subscribers is you get to say who's right and who's wrong. So I thought I would have you fearlessly weigh in on who's right and who's wrong on this one.
Yes. Well, first I'll say I'm very sympathetic to publishers and authors who are just worried about kind of the rights grab that this represents, because I do think on a contractual level, at least based on my understanding, I'm far away from those meetings where they're discussing the legalese. I mean, it does look like a distinct overreach and probably a breach of contract. So I'm sympathetic on that point. There should have been some sort of discussion or collaboration or something before Amazon or Audible just kind of came out and said, we're doing this, and plowing ahead as kind of big tech tends to do, ask for forgiveness rather than permission. Yeah. That said, if we could look 20 years ahead, I feel like this is going to be like a blip on the way to a very different world of media consumption. So, for instance, Google just announced this live transcribe feature for Android phones, which basically allows you to play anything, podcast, phone call, whatever, and you can see a live transcription go by. Like, that's how powerful the tech has become. And you're not paying for that. Like, that's just part of the service that Google is now providing you as an Android user. So when you consider where the technology is headed, this seems like, is it the battle you really want to fight? Certainly it's not this. I think it's very unlikely to be stealing away either ebook sales or affecting people's desire to read the book. I think there is a good argument here for how it assists with accessibility, with people who are interested in that scrolling text for English as a second language purposes. So there are some good arguments there. But yes, the right to overreach is concerning.
Yeah, I'm sure. You go to a lot of book conferences, Book Expo, Digital Book World, London, Frankfurt. I'm always interested in how an event like that ages. The one I always go to is South by Southwest, and I keep waiting for it to jump the shark, and it just doesn't. It just seems like yet? No. I mean, every year they seem, and last year, out of left field, they had this incredible preview of most of the major presidential candidates, including Mayor Pete, who I was in a room with him in March with about 20 people fielding questions from Anna Marie Cox, and I thought, Mayor of South Bend, are you kidding me? And it was just a brilliant display of his prowess. And then the next day, I was in the audience for the CNN town hall. So it's like they just seem to keep putting something surprising in front of the people that go there to where I just won't miss it, because I assume that each year there's going to be something that's going to be of interest. But among the book conferences, do you see some that are sort of staying at the forefront, maybe kind of losing a little of their luster? If you could only go to one of them next year, how would you describe that scene of the book events?
Sure. Well, there's definitely one that's struggling, and I think that everyone would agree on which one it is. Book Expo in New York. And I feel like there are lots of reasons that it's probably struggling that really have nothing to do with mismanagement necessarily, but just kind of, it's more indicative of the industry. But certainly there are probably some bad strategic decisions that have been made along the way. So every year it feels like they're trying to change it up in a way that they think will attract more booksellers or attract more attendees. And it just kind of just feels like it becomes more of a shadow of itself as time goes on. The programming is less diverse. They don't have as many educational conferences going on at the same time. And I don't know why that happened. Like, why did they decide to stop doing those things? Or did those conferences lose interest? I don't know, because they used to have a bloggers conference, a self-publishing conference, and like one or two other things. Interestingly, one of the conferences that was running concurrently with Book Expo, or just before, if I'm not mistaken, it was the audio book conference. And that like sold out.
Yeah.
So I guess that tells you where the winds are blowing. London Book Fair seems to be quite strong, and also for my purposes, I enjoy how it has a very strong author presence, and part of this is due to a partnership with the Alliance of Independent Authors. So for me, because it's based on an English-speaking country, that's of most interest to me as far as an international book fair, and a rights fair, of course.
Yeah, right. I'm also impressed at the number of newsletters that you read each week, so that you can provide the service of a kind of a digest of things that'll be several dozen writing and publishing newsletters. What tools are you using just to deal with that tsunami of information that comes at you every day and every week?
Indeed. It's a lot of email triage. So I do, most of it comes to me via email. It saves me the time of going out to sites or blogs. So even if there's a site or blog I like to follow, I do not like to spend my time going to their site. I'd rather receive their daily or weekly, whatever it is, to know what's new. And then I also use Feedly where that might not be available. So Feedly is kind of the tool that took the place of Google Reader after Google Reader closed. And then adjacent to that, I've always got Twitter open. That's kind of like having the radio on now, in the background. So if I can feel fairly confident that if I've missed something via email or Feedly, that someone somewhere is going to be tweeting about it. I have several lists. Like I have one for general media, one for book publishing, one for just the people who I really trust to stay on top of the news. And so with those three sources, I usually see it all.
How do you kind of gather it in a usable way so that when you sit down to write one of the newsletters, is something sort of automatically filling in an outline for you, or what's the tool you're using closer to the writing of it?
So I use Google Docs for the writing of it, and I try as much as possible to paste things into that Google document on an ongoing basis so that I'm not stuck for several hours at a time building it out. So as soon as I see something that I think ought to be covered, even if I don't have time to read it, I put it in the Google Doc. And then when I'm ready to do kind of the finer tuned edit, that's when I'll read it if I haven't yet.
Okay, I have another question that will challenge you to decide who's right. You were pretty diplomatic on that last one, so I'll expect a similar nuance. Macmillan versus the public libraries and tightening the rules about ebook lending. Who's right there?
Well, I'll admit up front that I'm behind the libraries more than the big publishers. It's probably the socialist in me. I would like information to be free and accessible to people who rely on libraries. I think they perform a tremendous public service. And I do believe in the PR message that they're trying to put out to their patrons and to the media, which is people who borrow from the library also buy books. And we are, in some ways, a publisher's marketing arm that we're not really getting paid for. That last part might be a little bit of an overreach because, there's some patrons who are never going to buy, of course. The libraries do pay for those ebooks in a much more significant way than a consumer would pay for them. So I don't want to get into kind of like the weeds of how these licenses work, but most libraries are paying upwards of $60 for a new release ebook, and it doesn't mean indefinite access. Usually it means 2 years max or up to 26 lens. So or is it 52? But you get the idea. Like you have to then purchase it again after the time's up. So I mean, they're certainly in Macmillan's figures, they've been very interesting. The facts that they've laid out, which portray their position in obviously a favorable light. They've also said that their earnings from libraries have shot up 800%. I would consider that awesome. But they clearly see it as taking away sales. And everyone is concerned that the data that they're receiving is primarily from Amazon, who sees the library borrowing data due to a relationship between Amazon and Overdrive, which is the technology provider for most libraries on ebooks. Mm-hmm. So because Amazon has this insight, and they don't allow their own books as Amazon Publishing to be given to libraries, it just creates this whole, like, it looks all very dark.
Yeah.
Amazon is trying to manipulate publishers into withdrawing from the library market. Now, I don't think that's going to happen, but it does seem short-sighted, I think, to be withholding material from libraries. And I think, however, just pragmatically, I don't think that the boycott that some libraries now have against Macmillan, I don't think it's going to work. I think it would take authors stepping up, making some noise, and also asking questions of their publisher about what their ebooks are being sold for, like at what price. I have asked so many authors this question: do you know what your ebook, on what terms it's sold to a library? Nobody knows, because it doesn't show up in your royalty statement. It gets lumped in with all the other sales, so no one knows. They don't know the size of the sales that come from libraries. So it's this black box, and that is not helping the fact that publishers don't share that data with their authors. I do know that the Association of Authors Representatives, the literary agents, are looking into this, so I have some hope that once they dig further in, they might be able to pressure publishers to create royalty statements that would reflect what libraries are contributing to authors' bottom lines. I think that would really help move the conversation forward, maybe make some more productive licensing agreements available to libraries.
I didn't realize that Amazon Publishing wasn't making its books available. That's like total? There's no exceptions? They just don't make ebooks available to libraries?
That's correct.
Huh. Which means maybe they agree with Macmillan's assessment of whether it cannibalizes sales.
Right. They must have come to that conclusion.
Huh. Interesting.
I can't think of any other reason why they would withhold.
Well, and let's finish up with Amazon Publishing. Interesting new player. I saw that in your you have this great graphic of the whole book publishing industry on one page. I had to get pretty close to my screen to pull it up from the tweet that you put, but you've got the big five and the smaller traditional and all that, and then down at the bottom there's a special category for Amazon Publishing, and that category is now 10 years old. It's founded in 2009. What's, from your vantage point, looking at the whole industry from the point of view of writers, what kind of impact has Amazon Publishing had, and pros and cons, or just how would you describe its role at this point in its first decade?
The size of it is really significant, and I still think most people don't realize how significant. Like, it's more than 1,000 new titles a year. Their backlist is now, beyond 10,000. I think that could easily make them the 6th biggest publisher in the U.S., if not, higher up. But of course, they don't have to share any details about how big that business is. Yeah. I think it's really tremendous what they've done in terms of what I have to assume is a more innovative contract for the author. I guess I've always assumed that they're offering better terms, say, on ebook sales, because, of course, a lot of their titles, the print copies aren't making it out into the bookstore market because bookstores don't want to give Amazon their business. So that means most of the sales are going to happen through the site, whether that's print or ebook. I think it's shown that you can create these really popular best-selling books strictly through online retail. They've had a number of bestsellers. They've broken out authors. But after listening, though, this was in February of this year, I was at a conference where an Amazon publishing editor was on stage with an agent and an author that they had broken out. And this is pretty rare to get to hear an Amazon editor talk about how this happened and maybe what sort of marketing tactics they tried. But I was just so kind of surprised at how similar the marketing for them is. Very similar to a traditional publisher's marketing, except they have a different way of putting the book in front of you a million times over. Mm-hmm. But they still have to do it. They still have to create multiple impressions, and also they have some really powerful tools that will show them if the price is at this point, they'll sell at this volume. But if it's at this higher price point, maybe they can't sell as many. But in any event, the editor emphasized the importance of word of mouth, which mm-hmm. is like, if we go back 20 years, that's what people were talking about.
Right.
So you still need like something about that book. There has to be some quality or appeal that gets people to recommend it and share it. So that to me was stunning. Like it's not just the algorithm. There is this intangible quality.
Yeah. The big get that they had recently was Dean Koontz with this contract for 5 standalone novels, plus the interesting collection of short stories I think is coming out next week. And he was on that same thing. I said, why did you switch from your traditional publisher to Amazon? And one thing he said was, all of the people I deal with at Amazon Publishing are like in their 20s. They're just so young. And compared to the people my age or whatever at the traditional publishers. And he was almost childlike in his sense that he's, in the early 70s, just a sense of a new part of his career fueled by all of these kind of oddball ideas sometimes about how to market his books. And I've wondered... I can remember when Amazon Publishing first started out, and Larry Kirschbaum, and everybody said, he's going to go after the big fish. He's based in New York, and, when will Patterson go with him? And it never happened. But Dean Koontz is a pretty big fish, 500 million copies of his book sold. Do you think that other major authors might say, well, if it's good enough for Dean, what am I missing here? And it might spark kind of a migration of much more substantial authors to their list?
I do think that's going to happen, and part of me is surprised that more of it's not happening, and part of it might just be the very kind of traditional nature of so many authors where, I wouldn't call it nostalgia exactly, but just the desire to see the book in stores or to support the independent bookstore community. So there's still this little bit of, reluctance to go in with Amazon when that might be, for their own community, that might look like it's just flipping the bird to the independent bookseller. So there is still a lot of that loyalty. Like I could never imagine literary authors taking that step, although Amazon, of course, has attracted them as well. But it's interesting you mentioned like way back when Amazon Publishing started with Larry Kirschbaum, because they tried to compete on this level where they, were bidding at auctions, or they were trying to get these high profile authors. And I think they quickly realized, this does not build on our strengths. This is not actually a game that's very profitable to play at all. And I think they kind of retreated back into their spreadsheets. I mean that like in the best possible way. Like we're going to do some data-driven acquisitions. And that has clearly, I think, paid off for them.
Yeah. There's this continuing disconnect in ebook pricing. Amazon Publishing ebooks are down, well under $10, and the big 5 are up to $15 or more. What's the impact just of that gap with one major publisher publishing the ebooks at such a affordable price? Does it create opportunities for them? Is it really sustainable to have kind of a 2-tier ebook market like that?
I worry that traditional publishers are really hampering especially their debut novelists, mid-list authors, by not having a little bit more of a friction-free purchasing experience on the ebook. I think it's to preserve their print sales in some respects. So when you see all those reports about the staying power of print, or how print has been stable or even increased over the last few years, it's because the ebook prices are so damn high.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a surprise when you look at the economics of the situation. So I feel like Amazon is pricing probably at some ideal point. I have to assume that they test this all the time.
Right.
And that's probably what most people are willing to pay. And of course, self-publishers then try to undercut that by going even lower. So I do see like more flexibility and responsiveness from some houses at some imprints some of the time, but I don't think it's nearly enough. And whether it's sustainable, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, let's close with any great books that have changed your life in the past year or so, or that you're eager to spread by word of mouth to other readers.
I have to make a guilty admission that because of all of my reading for the hot sheet, and because I'm such a loyal reader of The New Yorker, like I'm always current on my subscription.
Wow, that's impressive right there.
It kind of cuts out all of the book reading that I would like to be doing. But I will mention one book that I did recently read, but calling it a book is a misnomer. It's 20,000 words long. It's called How to Reform Capitalism. And it comes out of the School of Life, which I'm a great fan of, a UK business founded by Alan de Botton, who is one of my favorite authors. And while his name isn't on the cover, it's kind of in the spirit of all of his work. And it just, for me, as someone who has to balance the art and the business, and is interested in integrity in business, I just found it a fabulous, encouraging, inspiring book to read. Good recommendation.
I've been speaking with Jane Friedman. We didn't mention this, but I'll mention your book, The Business of Being a Writer. You published 2018, I think. Also editor of the Hot Sheet and Electric Speed newsletters for writers. Thanks very much, Jane.
Thank you, Len.
That's it for this week. As I said, my guest next week will be Dean Koontz, who's sold more than 500 million copies of his books worldwide. And on November 12th, his new Nameless short story collection is going to be published by Amazon Publishing. If you have Kindle Unlimited, you'll have a chance to download it for free. Each of the 6 stories counts as a separate borrowing. And I read them. Great, gripping story with a protagonist who has lost his identity, kind of an amnesia situation, and he ends up dispensing justice in a lot of very intense situations. Crisp writing, good plot, and classic Dean Koontz new material that he's worked out with Amazon Publishing as part of a major series of new books that he'll be publishing next year, 5 standalone novels as well. Good conversation, and that'll be next week's show. If you want to try my morning journal flash briefing on Alexa, it's easier now to do it. All you have to do is tell your Alexa, Alexa, enable morning journal, and then you'll have my skill all set up. And if you say, Alexa, what's new, you'll hear a daily 2 to 3 minute posts that I'm putting up each morning, kind of a daily practice that I'm experimenting with and having a lot of fun with it. It's very rewarding new platform to be experimenting with, and I know some of you are listening, and I've had some good feedback, which is helpful as I try to find my voice in this new way of communicating with people over the internet each morning. Thanks for listening. This is Len Edgerly in Cambridge, Massachusetts for the Kindle Chronicles. Have a great day. Bye.